Oh, that's loud. I'd like to dedicate this talk to my pawpaw and my nana boo and my husband, Mr. Roy Bradley, because he's watching. So, how many of you realize that you are sitting on a mountaintop? Yep. The exact same one that Dr. Martin Luther King, or if you have home training, Dr. Martin Luther the King or Kang, talked about in his speech, I See the Promised Land, or the infamous I Have a Dream Mountaintop speech, the night before his death on April 3rd, 1968. So what exactly does the mountaintop mean? Well, we've been taught that the mountaintop means racial equality, social tolerance, and just good old black folks done made it. But what if I told you that, yeah, we're on the mountaintop, but no, it ain't flat. And what if I told you that the young black folks who live in the contemporary South realize that the mountaintop ain't flat, that our music ain't flat, that our purpose ain't flat? And what if I told you that with all of that, and with all the regard that we have for those who have paved the way for us to realize that the mountaintop ain't flat, or that we can be messy, is that music I was talking about was hip-hop. Now see, some of your faces changed when I said hip-hop. Hip-hop. Nope, That's not Southern, that's not country, that's not rock and roll, right? We're Southern, so we verbalize, we pluralize everything, the countries and the rock and rolls. Hip-hop is urban. Hip-hop is brash. Hip-hop was meant for those black and brown teenagers in 1970s and 1980s New York to talk about their frustrations and concerns in New York. Well, when hip-hop made its way south, Southern listeners were like, oh, this is dope. But we also realized that, yeah, they're talking about something that doesn't really speak to us just yet. Let me give you an example. In New York, the subway is a mode of transportation. In a small rural city like Albany, Georgia, subway is a sandwich. So I moved to Albany, in 1998. I was 14, tall, lanky, and awkward. Isn't that great? And you know what? Dr. King went to Albany once upon a time, too. He really did. And he wanted to share his dream of this mountaintop and racial equality. And white folks in Albany was like, nah. And Albany is a living civil rights monument. You have the Civil Rights Institute, and a lot of the folks who marched and organized in the 1960s still live there. Had a teacher who was there, and February is Black History Month, so that's like Negro Employment Month. So that's when folks came out who marched and talked to us about this is what it means to be part of the civil rights movement. And my grandparents, Nana Boo and Pawpaw, never let me forget that the civil rights movement happened in Albany. And don't get me wrong, I love my grandparents. I used to love hearing them talk about, growing up in the South, and because, my pawpaw was from Athens, Georgia, and my nana boo was from Leary, Georgia, and if you know where Leary is, you really are Georgian. But the reality was, their South wasn't mine. They grew up in the Jim Crow South, came of age in the Jim Crow South, and if you let my pawpaw tell it, he was ready to hit Jim Crow with a big old stick. My South was different. I was able to enjoy the fruits and labors from the movement. I had access to integrated schools. There was no open segregation. I had a holiday to celebrate a certain king. But I also had hip-hop, which showed me that there were still a few things that were left unattended to from the movement in ways that my folks were like, you're not going to tell us that we know that you know that something is left amiss from the movement. So the question becomes, how does hip hop help us bridge the South from the past to the present? Well, if you were to listen to a music critic like, say, Charlie Braxton, he would say that hip hop been Southern. And that hip hop is just, a tree, or it's from the tree, and it's a branch that extends northward because, if you're Southern, it's not roots, it's ruts. Hip hop has Southern roots and just reached up northeast. And if you were to listen to a scholar like Trisha Rose, she says that hip hop is the contemporary stage for the powerless. Now let me think about this for a second. Have you ever met anybody more victimized than Southern Black people? Let me tell you what I'm talking about. In popular culture, we subscribe to a particular formula for Southern Black folks. We is weary of some white folks. We just deal with y'all. We live here because we have to, not because we want to. And then my personal favorite, child, they just so country and backwards down there, right? Aside from the fact of the flying cockroaches and the gnats that have their own opinion and can go to class for you type. And then when you really think about it, let's face it, normally when you think about this idea of the recognizable victim that is associated with Southern Black folks, it's linked to three major historical moments. The first one is the Antebellum Era and Reconstruction, right? That Gone with the Wind romanticism. Oh my God, Gone with the Wind. Well, folks would rather appreciate, this idea of the Confederacy as heritage without actually looking at the fact that slavery is the institution upon which that heritage is built. The second historical moment is Reconstruction Jim Crow, where segregation was open and separate was not equal. And then you have the third historical moment, which is the modern civil rights movement, where you have Black folks dressed up in their Sunday's best who are marching for civil rights and also the acknowledgement to be considered human beings. And after that, that's it. So where do folks who were born after 1968, like myself, I promise, after 1968, even though I'm cute, where do we fit into this conversation about the South and Southernness? Hip-hop is a tool for us to move past 1968. It is also a tool for us to recognize the illegibility of contemporary Southern Black experiences. We realize that we're the social outcasts, right? Speaking of outcasts, there were two in particular that I'm thinking about. A certain Mr. Antoine Big Boy Patton, who's from Savannahs, because remember, we pluralize everything in the South, Savannahs. And a certain Mr. André 3000 Benjamin, who are better known as outcasts. And their body of work in music is powerful in the fact that they took this idea of being outcast, being rejected, and utilized that to move past something that is considered Southness, which is the connection of ideas, experiences, realities to the physical region we know as the South, to Southernness, which is the conceptualization of the South, right? The ability to create worlds outside of the physical, cultural, and historical renderings of what it means to be Southern. And this really came to a head at the 1995 Source Hip Hop Magazine Awards. It was in New York. We already in trouble. And they won for Best New Duo for their first album, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music. Say that 3 times fast. And they're coming on stage, and all you hear is this booing in the background, and the booing is getting, louder and louder. And if you could boo in a New York dialect, it'd probably be like, boo, son. And Big Boy is like, we appreciate y'all letting us in your city, right? And trying to be diplomatic. And then Andre 3000 comes over, and he says a particular phrase that has become the battle cry for contemporary Southern Black folks. The South got something to say. And when he said the South got something to say, he didn't say it with an expiration date on it. He said the South got something to say then in 95 and now in 2017. And hip hop is the access point to do that. So when we say the mountaintop ain't flat, it's not a bad thing. We realize that. But on the one hand, hip hop helps us realize, yes, we have come a long way. But it's also a representation, yes, we still have a very long way to go. Thank you so much.